What's up, everybody? This is Avi, aka Jagnanaut.
And I'm Serena from Rena Studios. And today we're bringing a collaborative video that highlights both of our unique skill sets. The goal of this project is to use recycled plywood to create an art piece.
This project will undergo 5 major stages. The first is to create and draw a design on the board. The second is to back the board for rigidity. The third is to use a Dremel to carve out the design. The fourth is to create an inlay with resin. And the fifth is to sand and stain the piece.
This collaboration will be done in 2 videos, one on each of our channels.
Make sure to subscribe to both of us to see the entire process in creating this art piece. To start this project off, I used this carbide bit that came with my Wen Dremel tool set. Specifically, I'm using a Wen 1.4 amp rotary tool set with a flex shaft. Using the flex shaft gives me better control and accuracy when I'm cutting into the board and making these nice curved lines. I want you to keep in mind, I'm not a Dremeling expert. As a matter of fact, this is my first time Dremeling anything. So it took me probably about a good 20 minutes before I was comfortable enough to move my hand across the board and get nice, confident, consistent cuts. As I was working, I also realized that I needed to move the board around. I was actually free with the space that I had. So I turned the board around, I turned it upside down, as you can see here in a few seconds, and that really helped me control the cuts I was getting with the bit to get nice, consistent, clean edges. That way when we pour the resin in, it pours evenly and not at some weird angle. As I was working, dust did kick up, so luckily I was able to use this shop vac that Serena and I had just bought from a hardware store to clean up all the dust, giving me a nice surface to work with, making it so I could see everything that I was doing. I wanted to experiment with some different bits, so I decided to use this rounded stone bit, I guess I would say, to hog off some material. I needed to make sure that I could work quickly while working accurately, and luckily this bit allowed me to take off a lot of material quickly. If I were to continue to use a carbide bit, it would probably take me 2 or 3 times as long. I used this pear-shaped diamond bit as well to try to get some other areas, just to experiment. Again, first time Dremeling, so I'm trying to understand. It took me probably a few minutes and a few cuts to realize that I probably shouldn't be Dremeling directly into the wood with the bit. Rather, I decided to put the bit down, and as I dragged it down, I noticed I was getting a lot of material out of the actual design itself, and it really worked. It helped out a lot. But I still had to experiment more because there's some fine areas. So I decided to use this very fine, the finest diamond bit, I should say, that I have to get into these small areas like the mouse's tail. I want to make sure that the tail stuck out, and to use that, I needed something with much more accuracy. It was a little bit more difficult to use this because I was drilling in very, very fast into the wood. And the same thing happened with this particular bit right here, which looks like a pen in terms of the tip, but it really helped me get into the actual design itself and give a nice, really detailed piece and a nice detailed work to what I was doing. I don't have it in this video in particular, but I did use the router attachment that came with this Dremel to finish up the design. I used it particularly on the crown and on the border, and I've got to say it saved me so much time. I got this border done in probably 20 to 30 minutes, whereas if I was hand Dremeling, it probably would have taken me 2 hours. At this point, Serena and I are cleaning up the inside of the piece and all of the edges with 80 grit sandpaper to make sure that everything is concise, it's smooth, and that way when we pour the resin, we won't have any blotches or issues in terms of it sticking inside of the Ganesh piece itself. We used TotalBoat high performance epoxy resin with slow hardener, giving us 40 minutes of working time once the resin was mixed together. I wish I had read the manufacturer guidelines for this in terms of what I needed to use to color the resin. I used acrylic paints, specifically folk art acrylic paints, rather than pigments or alcohol inks, and in the end you'll see that the extra resin that I mixed up had a severe reaction. Luckily it didn't ruin the piece. But for this, we decided to mix up glitter acrylic with black acrylic to give us what I would deem as a starry night effect. If you look at the resin here, you see that the glitter shines through the black, looking like stars in the night sky. That was the overall effect I was going for in the piece. What we decided to do from this point was pour the resin into some silicone cups and make sure we got it in. And from here, we actually spread the resin around to get into all of the negative space. I did mix up another batch of resin because I didn't think we'd have enough, but after we started spreading it around, I realized that I mixed far too much. So for us, we decided to pour a little bit more on and then try to pour the rest into some cube molds that I had that I acquired off of Amazon. Now, this is what I mean by I wish I had read the manufacturer guidelines. I took the rest of the resin, poured it into these molds, And while we were working, we didn't notice this, but a reaction occurred with the acrylic paint in this total built resin. As you look here, and we're gonna zoom in a second, the resin and the acrylic paint reacted together, giving an intense exothermic reaction, causing it to bubble up, come out of the mold, and cure within minutes. Luckily, this only happens in large quantities and not small amounts, so the resin that we poured onto the board as the inlay was perfectly fine. Before staining the piece, we had to sand off the layer of resin on top, and to do so we used a Ryobi 5-inch orbital sander with 60 grit and 80 grit sandpaper. The biggest drawback I felt to this project was the fact that we used composite board, and composite board is just multiple kinds of wood squished together to form a board. The further you sand down into the board, the more different that it looks. As I was sanding with the 80 grit sandpaper, I unfortunately sanded too far, and there are some parts of the piece in which the wood grain and the style of the wood look very different from the overall piece. Originally, I looked at it as a mistake and I wasn't too happy, but when I talked to Serena about it, I couldn't look at it as a mistake anymore. We looked at the piece and thought, wow, it has a very unique and different character that it didn't have before. So in the end, it made me really fall more in love with the final product. You can see some of the blemishes that I'm talking about in the upper left-hand and right-hand corner of the piece. Still gives the piece unique characteristics, so we went ahead and decided to stain. We're using Watco Danish oil. This is a natural color Danish oil. And using Danish oil, it stains and seals the product. You've just got to be careful when using it. You want to make sure you're using it in a well-ventilated area. The fumes will get into your head. It'll make you dizzy. It'll make you nauseous. So always, always, always be safe with the products that you're using. To apply this particular stain, we put it onto some shop rags and we wiped it onto the piece. We gave the piece 3 coats on the top and on the sides, and after we were done with the top and the sides, we let it rest for a day, flipped it over, and stained the other side. As you can see, it gives it a nice golden sheen and really makes that black inlay pop out.
And here's our final art piece.
Woo!
So what do you think of our art piece?
You know, despite the minor imperfections that I thought we had, overall I'm in love with the final product.
And I actually think it came out better than I anticipated. I think it was maybe a little simple design, and I personally thought we could maybe have done even more, but actually it works pretty well.
Yeah, the one thing I wasn't really anticipating was just the vast amount of time it took. I think in totality, maybe this took us, what, like 10 hours worth of work? Because the dremeling took a long time, the resin and the curing and everything, so.
I remember it took a lot of labor.
The one thing I want to point out, really, which is the only true imperfection you can see from the piece, are the blemishes.
With any art project, there's always going to be problems. So tell me a little bit more about these blemishes.
Yeah, as you can see in the video, there are some spots where I sanded too far down, and you just saw the second layer of the plywood, and it stuck out to not be very appealing to me, but you know, at the end it did give the piece a really nice characteristic.
Considering this is our first art piece together, our first art collaboration, it was actually a lot of fun. I enjoyed it as doing it as a couple.
Me too, cutie pie. All right, everyone, if you love this content, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe onto our videos, and we'll see you guys in our next project.
Thanks, guys.